You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
You're going live with Choose FI. We've been going live on stereo for the last couple weeks. I think this is our third edition of this kind of interactive Q&A format. It's been pretty cool. We really appreciate those of you that have kind of followed us on this and participated. It is intended to be interactive, so we have a couple topics in mind, but we also are perfectly happy to go take this conversation anywhere you guys want to take it. So please feel free to submit a voicemail, a question, feedback, comment, and we'll do our best to get to as many of your questions as possible. I will just add, for those of you that maybe are listening to the podcast when it comes out over the next week or so, if you want to participate in this, we're going to be doing these stereo live events for about the next 7 or 8 weeks at least. And if you want to find out how to download that, how to join us, just go to choosefi.com/live. choosefi.com/live, and it will give you all the information you need to download, access the app, and join us on this session. So with that, and to help me with this, I have my co-host and good buddy Brad here with me today. How you doing, man?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. Yeah, this is fun. Always neat to do this live radio show type recording. So yeah, definitely enjoying it. And we actually had a big week this week. So both of my daughters went back to in-person school, which was amazing. And Jonathan, it had been 361 days since we had the 4 of us in the house every single day. So yeah, Monday was a pretty big day, needless to say.
I gotta say, on behalf of parents everywhere, it wasn't just a big day for Anna. I mean, it was a big day for mom and dad, right? I mean, routines get changed when the kids stay at home.
Oh, they certainly do. Yeah, it was wild. Laura and I dropped off both girls at school, and then we went to 8:30 CrossFit class together, which was neat. And yeah, had lunch together outside. The weather's gorgeous. It was a really nice day. And we were there to pick up Molly at school at 1:00. So yeah, it really worked out well.
And you're back at CrossFit. I mean, would you say that you are a fair weather CrossFitter, or are you a perma CrossFitter? Where do you fall on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not like a crazy CrossFitter. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool CrossFitter here. But I mean, I really enjoy going to the classes. I get a lot out of them. I certainly work myself harder than I would at home. So I think there's great value there. I think for me, what I'm going for now, like I'm never going to be super strong. Like that's never like even my goal. I just want to focus on being healthy, focus on longevity. And I think the particular CrossFit that you and I go to, that is what they focus on. So I definitely like the ethos of that particular gym. So yeah, I don't know how to answer your question.
Well, when the weather is when the weather is 8 degrees outside, and like, do you pop out of bed?
Literally fair weather.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, okay. We'll go with literally fair weather then. Yes, I agree.
I am. My motivation and enthusiasm for engaging in high octane cardiovascular and muscular events, it seems to be directly correlated to the weather. And I tell you right now, I was like, man, I'm missing CrossFit right now. I will just say, last week we were talking just briefly about, I was admitting that I was starting to get to some level of just adrenal load, just absolute fatigue that I couldn't break through. When you're drinking coffee and you're just like back to baseline, you don't even have extra energy as a result of it anymore. You are just like, okay, well, I can get up, maybe I should have the second cup. You're not even 30 minutes in, you're already thinking about the second cup because you're just trying to get back to where, the benefits you used to get from the first cup. And I was like, I gotta do a coffee detox, but that almost sounded more painful. And this week I tackled it through the lens of massively increasing my vegetable and fruit consumption. And so I've probably consumed, I mean, liters of juice that's just combinations of fruit and veggies that we had in the house and some that we've now obtained. And doing that in parallel to good sleep and just completely cutting the caffeine, maintaining high hydration levels. And I almost always associate coming off caffeine with like tension headaches, and absolutely none of it. In fact, today you saw me, I was bouncing off the walls and I was like, I feel like I have a really steady state energy right now that it's hard to express to you how unusual this is for me. I mean, normally my energy levels are tied directly to my caffeine consumption. Here I am now 3 or 4 days post caffeine. And I mean, I'm just, let's zeal for life, man. Maybe it's the fair weather conflating factors, but I mean, I'm telling you, I think I'm onto something here.
No, it certainly helps. Yeah, I mean, you were high on life today. That's for
High
sure.
on life. Yes. Can we all get a little bit more high on life? What's he having? I'll take two. That's where I was today.
But the funny thing, we talk about 1% better, right? And a lot of the things with your health, with your finances, it really comes down to the basics. Like you said, it's about getting the right sleep. It's about hydrating, right? If you're dehydrated, even at a low level, and you don't realize it, you're not going to feel that great. And you're going to probably get headaches. You're probably going to feel fatigued. Like all these things, if you're eating garbage food, right? You're eating loads of processed carbs and just disgusting things. Like you're probably not going to feel that good. And you make just a couple of those changes and all of a sudden you're high on life. It's really pretty neat to see. And, I am constantly looking for these little 1% improvements. And this is like a take your own medicine, right? We are always talking here about, again, these 1%. Just look for them in your life. Just look for them where you can. And I've got a couple, actually, if you'll indulge me here, Jonathan. So,
Ooh, yeah.
the first was that we actually went through our credit card bills for the first time in a while. I mean, I scan them, let's say, every month. I'm not like completely unaware, but I went through in depth for the first time in a while and I actually found a couple of recurring charges that just didn't really suit us anymore. And actually, one jumped out to me. So we were paying for a rental for my daughter Anna's saxophone. Okay. And the concept when we first started this was, oh, we don't know if she's actually going to keep up with the sax. Does it make sense to buy it? There were some like complicating factors here to the story. And without, making this convoluted and boring, like they had like ultimately each month, a portion of it went to a future purchase, et cetera, et cetera. But that's all complicating factors. Let's say I saw this charge on our bill for $50 a month. Okay, that was the rental charge, $50 a month. And now, again, a small portion of that is ultimately equity, if you will. But let's just assume this was a $50 expense. And I said to Laura, like, let's do some research on what it costs to actually buy a saxophone, right? Like Anna made the jazz band a year early and, she loves the saxophone. Like she's a long-termer, it seems like. So it made sense. And we actually called up the store and it cost $500 to buy the thing outright. And the saxophone is actually worth, like if you bought it new, it would be $1,200. So we were able to buy this sax. Now, again, we had been renting it. And again, a small portion of this each month went towards that ultimate purchase price. But regardless, the important factor was we're paying $50 a month and we're going to rent this theoretically forever, or we could just lay out $500 at one time. And that $50 charge comes off of our bill every single month. So an absolute no-brainer, 10-month and it's off. And now she owns this saxophone, which, even worst case scenario, we could resell for $300, $400, maybe even more potentially. And it was just one of those kind of cool things. And it illustrates, I think, a couple of points, right? So look at your credit card bills, look at these recurring charges because you made that decision at some point in the past, right? And there was some thought process theoretically, oh, I'm going to use Apple TV Plus or whatever, or hey, I want to watch a couple of those games on ESPN Plus. I can justify the $4 a month or whatever it is. Like, but then it stays on, right? And you never cancel. And that's why it pays to go back, even if it's just twice a year, just to take a real critical eye at your credit card bill and make the determination like, hey, does this serve me anymore? I guess I'll shut up now, Jonathan. But my other point here, just real quick, was the power of FI, the power of having money in the bank. We are in a fortunate position where we can pretty easily lay out $500 because we have saved money over decades now. And we don't make financial decisions from a cash flow perspective, from like a deprivation. Oh, am I going to have enough money in the checking account this month? We make decisions based from a position of strength. And, just the simple fact of being able to lay out $500 for this saxophone, I think illustrates that, right? So we are not continuing to pay this junk rental fee every single month. So anyway, that was a nice little win for us.
Yeah, this is so first of all, in the spirit of canceling things, I did actually cancel my Netflix subscription. I wasn't using it a lot. I had binged their archives. Challenge accepted, Netflix. Meet COVID. I've got you. Binge everything. I was like, you know what? They're not really bringing it, and I'm fine that I'm just going back and watching the same things over and over again. So let's just take a pause. So yeah, I canceled it, and right now got HBO Max. You could have one. You could have another. Do you need them all in parallel? You don't owe them that. You could just cancel it and switch over. HBO Max has Justice League, the extended cut, the Snyder cut. Is that it? And I was like, I'll just be over here for a little bit. And then we can go back. There is no participation award for having all 8 of them. It's not a collect them all. There is no stamp. There is no prize. But you are guaranteed to be blowing through effectively when you cut the cord. Hey, yeah, I cut the cord. But then you picked up, YouTube Plus and the 5 others. You just kind of replaced it all. So, think about that. Which one are you using? The rest got to go. At least that's something I did. Now, to your other point, and this is kind of where I wanted to land. I wanted to push back a little bit. It's not pushback as much as it is kind of just expand this out for the audience. Like, I think the larger point was, is there something we're paying in recurring expenses that we could just get out of the way and like streamline our finances? So in the future, when we are looking at these credit card statements, there's just less to sift through. But even more than that, at what point is it not quite as cut and dry? So for instance, I bet you there's a lot of people listening to this that have a car payment, and maybe it's a $2,000 car payment. If you have a $2,000 car payment at a 2% interest rate and you are flush with cash, Brad, you personally, would you pay that off?
So if it's a 2% interest rate on the car payment?
2% interest rate, maybe a 3. Let's say it's a 2, it's less than 5. It's probably in the 2 to 3% interest rate. You've done the math on it and you're like, man, the writing on, I have all this money in the bank, or I could have my car paid off and it's a 2 to 3% interest rate. Like I elevated the danger of the conversation off the sax into the car, but I bet you this is actually where people are.
What did you say the car payment was every month? Not that it's relevant.
Okay, I did not give you an actual car payment. Let's just say they got 3 years left on the car. 3 years left on the car. They bought it used. They got it financed. It was an 8K car. Now they only owe a couple grand. It's enough that your net worth could just cover this. You could just pay it off. But it's only a 2% interest rate, a 3% interest rate. And there are certainly a lot of people in the personal finance community that would just say, no, pay it off. And I don't think that's wrong, but I'm just curious, you're in the situation. Would you pay it off?
For me personally, I don't think I would. I think at that interest rate, I can find better things to do with my funds, basically. So for me, it's funny, Jonathan, because we always talk about this intersection of the math and the psychology, right? That is just this never-ending battle when it comes to each individual's own way they approach FI. And I think it's going to be this never-ending conversation because there's no right answer, okay? And I think this is really important for everybody listening to this is I'm not going to sit here and pontificate and try to explain to you and convince you to do one thing. It's just, I think it truly is personal. I know there are many, many people who are so debt averse that come hell or high water, they are paying off that debt, right? And maybe you could make the argument that they wouldn't have gotten into this debt in the first place if they were that person. But even putting that aside, paying off the debt is the only thing that matters to them. And I fully respect that. And that person would move mountains to pay this thing off, right? Or in your hypothetical, they would just liquidate some funds and pay the thing off. I think for me, I would look more at interest rate for that. And I think that falls more on the mathematical side than the psychological side. It's even though I am not really dogmatic about that. And you know that. Like I fall down on the psychological side usually more often than not. But if I made the determination to take out this car loan at some point and I got a rate as low as, 0, 1, 2, even 3%, I would find it very difficult to want to accelerate that so much that I would liquidate thousands of dollars worth of funds. Then again, And I want to get back to you. I mean, you're hearing caveat after caveat here from me, but like,
Well,
if
you're
it
right,
got
because
down to like,
I gave you a very one-dimensional question, and you're absolutely right to kind of share more what your thought process is. And so this is where we're going. It's the entire point is to kind of round out what the logic is, for you, and then to expand out maybe considerations for the audience.
yeah. So thank you for the grace. I appreciate it. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, obviously. But if it got down to $1,000 or $2,000 and I, had the money lying around, I'm not gonna lie and say I wouldn't really strongly contemplate just sending that extra payment and getting rid of it. But if we're talking about $15,000 on a car, and again, I made that determination that it's the wisest move to finance this at a very, very low interest rate, I don't think I would have any burning desire to pay the thing off quickly. I guess that's kind of where I come down. If this were, at 8%, 12%, if you're talking credit cards and we're getting into the 18, 20, 24, like that is, as we call it, hair on fire type scenario, right? Like if you have any type of debt with 20% interest, that is a completely separate issue from 2% where you theoretically could very easily do better by investing the money. You are not going to do better. You just simply aren't going to do better than 20%, right? So if you have credit card debt, that is hair on fire situation. You got to do what you got to do.
I think I agree with you. By the way, we are synced up on this one. But one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is the nuance that's involved, and also the stigma on both sides. It's important to pierce that and realize don't let anybody put you inside of some sort of little box and say, "Oh, well, if you're in the FI community, you can't do this, or you only have to do that." Like, just know thyself and know why it is you made the choice that you did. And let me give you the dangers of the answer that we're making, and then the counterpoint, and then kind of even this out a little bit. I don't think you need to pay off your car payment if it's, aggressively and early and cash out your 401k and sell all of your taxable brokerage account in order to not have a car payment. I kind of made a caricature there, but I don't think that you need to necessarily in order to say, hey, I'm on the path to FI, so that's why I liquidated my bank account and my investments to pay it all off. I don't think that's necessary. But the counterpoint to that, and this is where I think people need to really just check themselves, is why did you have the car payment to begin with? And not that you can't, or even that you shouldn't do it. But when we move away from how much something costs to what is the payment, we very quickly leverage our life, right? We are able to have more stuff in the short term, which is great. But if that's the way that we interact with everything, we dig a hole that it's very difficult to dig our way out of. And so if having the car payment and leaving the car payment now gives you the cash flow to now finance more stuff, more furniture, more whatever, it's a problem. Now, that's a fundamentally different person than what Brad is describing. If you truly get the ethos and the mindset, what we're talking about when we're talking about pursuing financial independence, and you realize that all of your money represents your life energy. And when you make the decision to buy something, you're trading your most precious non-renewable resource, your time, for that stuff. The ability to finance allows you to effectively and in a more insidious way transfer a lot more of your life energy without realizing it. There's less cost up front, but that ticket is going to come due, and it's going to be stretched out over a very long period of time. And you end up in this situation where you got that great commercial way back in the day. The guy's driving around on his lawnmower. You remember this, Brad? He's got all the trappings of a great life. We got to dig this up. It's a true classic. Garage is filled with the boat and the car, and he's got the riding mower, and he's got all the toys. And they're asking, and George, how do you do it? He's like, well, let me tell you, I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. Right? That's the counterpoint here. Now, this person with this $2,000 credit card and this choice of, well, I've got $8,000 in my taxable investments and it's only a couple $100 a month payment. I'll be done in a few years. What's the big deal? Not a big deal. You're great. Pay it off. Don't pay it off. As long as you realize that every other dollar that by not paying it off, like the money that you're saving, what are you doing with that? Are you using it to invest to get better returns, or using it to buy more stuff? If you're using it to buy more stuff, you're still in the trap. You haven't made it to the other side where you're looking at your money as a tool. I'll give it back to you after just saying that even with all of that being said, I do personally feel the need to pay off low interest rate car loans faster than normal. And it more goes to the simplicity side. I don't like having structural payments in my life longer than I need to. It's a personal bias. And it's probably a stigma that stuck with me over time from kind of coming through like a Dave Ramsey type approach to debt. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's necessarily right. But I just like the comfort of not having structural expenses hanging over. I always tend to pay off my stuff early, but it's kind of more of a way of protecting myself because I'm also a spender. And because I recognize that I'm a spender and I don't always look at things from a logical perspective, I look at things through a marketing lens like, oh, that's pretty. Let's do that. Shiny object. Oh, you can tell me I can finance it over 3 years. To protect myself against that, I rarely finance things. And that's like the balance point from like two individuals that are in the FI community, but kind of look at the world through a different lens and have our own, weaknesses.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to know yourself, right? Like, you have to, on some level, set up little guardrails for yourself. Having that knowledge is just so critical, right? And again, wherever you come out on these decisions is truly completely up to you. And I think, like I said 10 minutes ago, it is completely up for debate. There's no right answer, but you have to know yourself. And yeah, I mean, Jonathan, I think we both have information that like is critical to our own decision making. And like we've talked about with the mortgage and with other debt, like there's that how well do you sleep at night test, right? Which you cannot discount that. Like, math be damned. If you can't sleep well at night with that debt hanging over you, that might be hair on fire situation for you, even if it's 5%, 7% debt, right? Or interest rate. You need to figure out what works for you. And Jonathan, what's cool about this live here is our buddy Josh Overmeyer just sent us a meme. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs. So I
he found it.
I have a picture of the guy. It's fantastic. So Josh, thank you, buddy. And just a reminder to anybody on the live stream with us, if you guys have questions, definitely send them in via the voicemail functionality. So we've got a couple of them queued up here. Jonathan, should we get rolling with the first one?
Yeah, let's play a voicemail.
All right.
I'm having an issue determining how much is enough and when to call it quits. Originally, before I started the fire journey, I wanted $10 million at age 65. Right now, I'm thinking that the time required to make that happen may not be worth it, but it is a possibility. What do you think is an adequate amount to cover things like long-term care in the future and any other negative things that may happen?
Okay, this is a great question. It actually kind of teased me up to what we were talking about at the beginning, because we're talking about long-term care for ourselves now. So we've got this great number in mind, this $10 million, and Brad, 4% rule. How much would that give us to live off of each year? Like if we had $10 million, we would then say that's going to be enough for an annual budget of, who's using a budget?
Yeah, that's $400,000.
All right, you just got to keep it under 400K. If you can keep it under 400K, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's a big number. That's obviously a big number.
Nothing wrong with the big number. No judgment here. I mean, it's great. I'm just saying that if you hope you love your job if you're like waiting to 65, right?
Yeah, and I think at least how I'm hearing the question, and obviously we have to go back and listen to it again, but this was, hey, maybe before I found the FI community. I always had this number, and it almost sounds like a Susie Orman number, right? Like, yep. Oh, you need $5, $10, $20 million to retire because of long-term care, and you might want to buy your own island, and you might want to do this and that, right? Like, I think it always depends on your life situation. Obviously, there's no way we could fully answer this, right? But it depends on your life situation. And yeah, I mean, clearly there are going to be factors that we can't talk about specifically about your life, but it comes down to, what does your life cost? Right, Jonathan? I mean, that is the interesting thing about the FI community and this way of rethinking how much do I need? And maybe what is enough? When is enough? It is turning the traditional concept of how much do I need on its head. And we've talked about this so many times with the traditional retirement calculators. They all start from the point of, what do you earn today? And how do you replace that? But that's not what you need to cover. You need to cover, what does your life cost? What are your expenses, right? That's what you truly need to cover in retirement. Your income is irrelevant because by definition, to ever get to a point where you can retire, there has to be savings built into there, right? Your taxes when you're earning the most amount of money are going to be significantly higher than when you're at a point of retirement, whether that is early retirement or traditional retirement, right? So again, I think it's a fundamentally flawed way of looking at it to say, hey, I need to base this off of my current income. So therefore, we in the FI community, we look at the truly important number, which is, what does my life cost? And you base your entire FI calculation off of that.
And, what do I think my life will cost, or what sort of cost would I like to be able to cover, because we're future looking, in a post-work life. Do you think that your costs would that's the sort of vision mapping you want to do. If you think that, right now, this doesn't accurately reflect, what you want to be able to spend, then you're going to need to account for that as well. But here is this is where we can get a little bit more nitty gritty, and why I think this question is actually has a lot of meat on it. Vegetarian, it could have a lot of hemp on it. Something, we're working on these metaphors. All right. He said to be able to 10 million, Susie Orman, to be able to cover long-term care insurance. I think people fundamentally forget this. I forget it. All of us forget it. But health insurance is the perfect example. Health insurance is a mercenary mathematical calculation that is meant for you to lose to the house, basically. It's intended that way, right? Basically, in aggregate, they look at the average cost of humans and they put you in risk pools depending on the different information that you give them, your age, your gender, your smoking status, your blood pressure, all these, these sorts of other things. And then based on that in aggregate as a pool, they then can put some sort of actuarial tables in place to make sure they don't lose money on you. In aggregate, a person, they might lose money, but, as the pool, they don't lose money. And I know I can, anecdotally, I can say it's always interesting how you hit the deductible right at the end of the year. You get one medication that's covered in full, yay, and then you start back over with that $10,000 family deductible. This has literally been, our story, and I know so many other people that can mirror this. It's kind of covered a little bit when you have employer insurance and they're covering some sort of subsidy, but at its core, it's a freaking actuarial table that you're intended to barely win and usually lose, not egregiously. Now, if we realize that that's true, if you agree with me, I'm not saying everybody does. I think probably a lot of you do. It's also true for long-term care insurance. It's an actuarial table. They're not losing money. The companies that lost money went bankrupt. And so it's priced with these actuarial tables in mind to make sure they do better than, they are the house. The house always wins. That's the key here. So let's just play this out. Our original scenario says we need 10 million so that we can cover this unknown cost of long-term care insurance when we're in our mid-50s. The voicemail sounded like the individual's probably, big spectrum here, 20 to 40, somewhere in that range. It's not really going out on a limb to guess that. So we're saying minimum of 15 years. It could be 15 to 30 years before they're really going to be considering the cost of long-term care. Who knows what it is? But to make our life decisions, what are you doing with your golden years to do that? What do you want to do with your prime years now to what might be the case when you're 55 to 65, because long-term care insurance, Susie Orman says it's very expensive, is crazy. I mean, and not you. I'm for the voicemail. Thank you for leaving. I'm just saying, think about that. What do you want now? What do you want in the interim, in the intermediate time period? This isn't get rich quick, but we could pretty well map out a path from wherever you are to get to wherever you want to be in sub 10 years, not 20 or 30 years. I mean, I'm not saying a $10 million number for everybody, but you could get to financial independence if you made this all right, this is what we're doing. 10 to 15 years, you've got this, even if you're starting in debt. I'll lay one extra thing on this. Now, the first individual is working their tail off, working up the corporate ladder, throwing everything in their investments because they just got to get to that number because long-term care. The second individual says, it's actually my most precious non-renewable resource is my time. All right, it's my time. And guess what? When I reclaim my time, it actually acts as a superpower because everybody that's chasing 10 million is stuck on the rat race trying to go up the corporate ladder. They don't have any of this precious resource, their time, to focus on life inspected, right? To go through, why is my health progressively getting worse every single year? What is the stress doing to me what is my poor diet? What is all the eating out? What is the stress consumption doing to me over this longer period of time? When you actually free up that space and you start looking at what does it look like to be able to put more time, not just into treatment with medications, but actually preventing those to begin with. Every single time you go to the doctor, let's just go this route because it's important. You go to the doctor and you're on the cusp and they think you might have high blood pressure or you're in that little range. What is it? Every single time they say, all right, well, Mr. Jones, your blood pressure is trending a little bit high. If we could do some lifestyle modification, if we could lose, I don't know, maybe 10, if you could lose 10%. So right now you're 200 pounds. If you could lose 20 pounds over the next 6 months, I really think there's a chance that would get your blood pressure in line. So let's watch the diet and let's try to focus on this weight goal over the next whatever month. And let's have you come back in and we'll redo that. So the lifestyle, no one has time, right? Too busy. No one has time. No one has the energy. We're just trying to get through our routine. And so we come back in 6 months later. We haven't made the changes. It's staying about the same when it goes up. And this happens over and over again. And then, all right, you have high blood pressure. And now we're just in the treatment realm. And we've passed over the preventative measures to focus on the treatment because we don't have time to really make the lifestyle choices, quote unquote, we don't have time, right, to make the lifestyle choices that could potentially nip this in the bud. I mean, this is the sort of thing. What I'm trying to say here is that having time, having bandwidth, having space is a superpower that's not accounted for in actuarial tables. You have information that they don't have when they're putting these numbers together. And while we cannot control the price of long-term care insurance 20 or 30 years from now, what we can do is during our prime years, we can start building systems, focus on the aggregation of marginal gains, focus on our health, and put some barriers in place to give us the best chance. Like, I really don't think that 30 years from now, 50 years from now, we're going to have figured out how to live to 300. Some people will say that that's possible. I don't know. Like, if you do all sorts of things, I am doubtful of that. But what I do think is absolutely possible is that we could extend our quality years far beyond what we've come to expect. Most of us expect that your cognition, your physical function, it's decreasing rapidly when you get to, mid 60s, 70s, and 80s. And by the time that you're 90s, if you're lucky enough to live that long, it's going to be in a nursing home. I mean, that's just kind of what we've accepted. And I think legitimately, if we as a society had more time to put into our health and think about it and put these choices earlier on, we might not hit 170, 150, 130, but damn, I think you could reclaim decades of high quality, high productive years. Brad, that's my rant, but I know you're at least sympathetic to that perspective because I know how much time you spend looking at this stuff.
Yeah, that I definitely didn't expect you to go down that rabbit hole, obviously, Jonathan. But you're right. I mean, clearly there's a lot in there, and we'll kind of summarize it here quickly, and let's get moving to the next question. But for me, you're right. Time is unquestionably the most important resource we have. So I would not wish anything away to 65 or later if I had the opportunity to reach FI earlier, right? So I also wouldn't worry and have it cripple me for something that may not come to pass. So I think that's kind of how I would mentally approach this. Is I think that time is critical. And to your point, there are things that you can do to impact your health, right? Obviously, there are many things that are outside of your locus of control, but I think there are many things you can do to control it. And I think if we focus on that, and when you have the time to do that, you can take walks more often, you can work out more often, right? So there are things within your control. And I think, the value of having that time to spend time with family and friends, loved ones, doing things you want to do, like there's going to be an almost incalculable benefit to that. So yeah, I am definitely with you. And Jonathan, all right, I'm going to load up the next voicemail here. I think it's actually from Rob Phelan from the Simple Startup.
Nice.
Hey, Brad and Jonathan, it's Rob here from the Choose a Vi Foundation team. I had a really interesting class today. I had a student talk to me about NFTs, and I realized I know nothing about what these non-fungible tokens are. So I did a deep dive in it after the class, went about an hour in. I probably need another 10 to fully understand it. But I want to know, what's your guys' perspective when new things pop up, new technology, new investments, new ways of doing things? Do you still take the time to go and explore it? Or do you just say, you know what, I'm setting my methods. I'm not going to be open to any new ideas along the way. Thanks, guys.
I love it.
What a question that is. That's really meta. I mean, that's beyond obviously this one particular instance about NFTs, but it's funny because I have done personally a deep dive on these NFTs in the last 3 weeks. So it's interesting to hear Rob the same, but the larger question is new information, learning new things, exploring. I think for myself, it's always know thyself, right? Like I am never like a first mover on anything, but I do pride myself in knowing when that tipping point is and trying to get in there earlier than the average person. So I can benefit in some outsized manner. But very, very rarely am I going to be that absolute insider who knows something 5 years before anybody else. But I do take in information far and wide. I think that's one thing that, like, we talk about the talent stack and just having a diverse set of interests and a diverse set of resources where you get your information and reading just voraciously. I think that to me is how I learn about everything. I try to take in as much as I possibly can. If it were up to me, I'd be like Charlie Munger, who from Berkshire Hathaway, who his family describes as a book with legs. So basically all they see him is sitting in a chair. They see the book and his legs. I think that that is something that I maybe aspire to a little bit more than the current reading that I do. But I think to Rob's question, like I genuinely love learning new things. And I am not going to jump on every single brand new thing that comes across my plate. But when I see something that I think can be potentially world changing or just transformative, I want to learn more. And I think actually, interestingly enough, and Jonathan, we don't have to spend a lot of time on NFTs themselves, but like I think this has the potential to be world changing 10 or 20 years from now, maybe even before. There are probably people laughing at me saying 10 or 20 years, but that's almost besides the point. Like how do you think about learning new things and taking in new information?
Well, the loaded question for me. I mean, it speaks to my soul, the idea that you can, we have these phones in our pockets that have access to unlimited information. You can learn anything you want to learn. Really, your job is not to think of anything new at this point. It's just curation and synthesis. It's how do you curate the best information quicker and then synthesize it so you can do something with it, whether it's just to share it in a conversation, to build a business around it, to just add to your talent stack. I mean, my process now is just skim everything, see what pops up and then, once something reaches there's like a point at which, oh, this is real. There's really something here. And this fits in one of the various buckets of things that I'm focused on right now. Then now do a deep dive. And you know me, man, I go really, really deep at that point. So I do not know a lot about NFTs. I wouldn't say it's a blind spot as much as I decided that cryptos were hitting critical mass, like in terms of like changing the world, and blockchain was changing the world. And so I've been really starting to dive into what that means for society and what that means for us. And I know NFTs are loosely, it's a subcategory of that. It serves a very specific purpose. But I got to say at this particular point, the character of NFTs do not look particularly appealing to me. Now I'm getting a little more focused. So my larger question to Rob's thing is, I love learning, and you're never done learning new things. And I'm no longer afraid of it. Like it's just go for it and fail. And then just, go deeper. And you might go after diving into something, you might find out that it's not for you and you might go in a different direction. But I'm never complacent and I'm never satisfied. I'm always hungry for what's that, you only get one life. There's somebody that's an expert in everything. I'm just trying to find someone that can convince me that it's worth spending a piece of my precious life looking into this aspect when there's so many other things competing for your attention. But Netflix is not competing for my attention right now, so I have some space. So now I'm interested NFTs, Brad. Like Jack Dorsey, do we really think his tweet is worth $2.5 million? Like, I don't want to start there, but I was late to Twitter. So there it is. Like, it does feel, I'm sure there is a very practical use, but the $2.5 million tweet sounds like a tulip.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's going on right now is absolutely absurd. You hear about these individual little pixelated art that's selling for $3 million and, all this other nonsense. Like you said, Jack Dorsey's first tweet for $2.5 million. Like, I can't imagine why you would do that. But I think the future of this is digital ownership of anything. And I think that is interesting. So I keep thinking
digital,
about
sorry to interrupt you, but digital ownership of a physical product?
I guess it could. It's mostly digital, but what's interesting is you're starting to see different aspects of this. And I think anything that can be built around some type of blockchain smart contract, that anything that can be coded in can be doable theoretically. So for instance, the band, the Kings of Leon, they just came out with an NFT for their new album. And what they did was they wound up making I think the number is 6, golden tickets, they called it. So they get a digital version of the album and they have this very specific golden ticket that is authenticated on this blockchain. And it actually has real world ramifications. So the owner of that gets 4 free front row tickets at a concert of their choosing for every single tour that the Kings of Leon do for now until, the rest of eternity, until they break up. So it can include real world things, but it's mostly going to be based on digital items. So the way that I keep thinking about this is let's say, and it's funny, this is the way my brain goes, is where could you take this? If I were making this up, where would I go? So you've seen the NBA Top Shots So this is another one of these NFTs. I think they've sold something on the order of $300 million worth of these NFTs in the last like 30 or 45 days. And it seems kind of gimmicky to me. It's almost like old school, like baseball cards, or, in this case, basketball cards. And, there's like 30 top shots of this LeBron dunk. And, you have this limited edition. But that to me, again, seems gimmicky. But what happens if the NBA decides, hey, we're going to pre-sell the rights for every single one of our games in 10-second segments? Okay. So before the game even starts, it's a 48-minute game. You can buy second 0 to second 10. And then, minute 21:10 through minute 21:20. And you are the owner of those 10 seconds. You bought it beforehand, right? For whatever, a couple $100, a couple $1,000. If there's some amazing highlight, you are now the owner of that, like the official owner of that on the blockchain. And for all eternity, you get some type, and again, it's written into the contract, however it may be, for every time it's viewed, you get a quarter of a penny or whatever, whatever it may be. Like anything can be built out. Or what if a band like the Grateful Dead or Pearl Jam, right? What if they took every single one of their concerts and turned it into a one-of-a-kind NFT that one person is the owner of? Like, could you imagine if, that concert that you went to, like I went to a Pearl Jam concert in 1994 at, Nassau Coliseum. Like if I bought that concert and literally any single time it was streamed, I got X% of the revenue and Pearl Jam got the other X%. Like anything can be built in. So, again, these are just stupid examples that I've made up in my own brain. But like, think about how world-changing things could be if literally anything can be owned like that. So long story short, in my estimation, this is, there's something here and I'm fascinated by it. I truly am.
So I guess part of my personal hang up, and it just has been, you've done a little bit of research in this and it is top of mind for a lot of people. I mean, we see Rob mention it, but I've seen it pop up a couple of times. It's maybe part of my hang up is that I've never been particularly interested in the collectible space. So the examples you all listed were kind of that vein. But it does seem like we're taking digital IP and we're turning it into a type of stock, right? As an alternate way of looking at this, we are creating a stock market, a speculative stock market on digital IP, maybe even physical IP. Like it's just a ledger of truth that without getting an IPO, you can, having go through the IPO process, you can basically crowdsource ownership of whatever, and you could do fractional shares or you can do whole ownership depending on what you want. And so it gives people a way. I mean, the actual mechanism, it sounds like right now it's mostly happening in the collectible space, but like the actual mechanism is basically giving you an alternate to the stock market that could be driven by a software platform like Kickstarter, basically. I mean, that's kind of at its essence. We're talking about just being able to turn almost anything into its own mini IPO.
Yeah, that's fair. That's okay. Very, very fair.
All right. Well, that makes sense to me. Makes me feel more confident in where this could go, because you could see a bunch of scenarios where individuals, they're not accredited investors, but they're, maybe it's a movie. The next Avengers movie is suddenly available as an NFT and you're getting access to some sort of royalties for products that, like, these are the types of things that become possible when you can have people front load for a percentage of ownership in a product. And then now you can scale this thing out and you're like, okay, speculative investment, but yeah, I know where this goes. I know what blockbusters do. And every single time a Friends episode gets played anywhere, I get on Hulu, I get my 10 cents for partial ownership in this, whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's this really interesting intersection of collectibles, of scarcity, of potential income streams. I think when you see technology that's just at its absolute infancy, but you see the potential, it's fun to just kind of have that thought experiment. And I think that gets back to Rob's question ultimately, which is like, I genuinely love just like letting my mind just go and see like, where could this theoretically go? And I probably thought of 1/1000th of 1% of where it could actually go. But that's what's so cool is when you see technology that really could change the world. So yeah, I don't think Jack Dorsey's dopey first tweet is going to do anything. And I think that person, probably would rather have their $2.5 million left. But I suspect 5 or 10 years from now, we're going to be blown away by this.
Hey, this is Andrew from the Choose FI team. I hope you're enjoying the show. We're going to get right back to it after these quick messages.
All right, that was a great question. Let's get another one queued up here.
Hello, I'm a 7-year-old kid, and I want to learn about investing.
Oh,
This is amazing.
that is adorable. I'm a 7-year-old kid who wants to learn about investing. Oh, that's fantastic.
Brad, kick this thing off. You have just been, someone has actually asked you for your opinion. They're 7 years old and they're saying, all right, fine. I'm open-minded. I'm willing to get started early. Challenge accepted. Teach me. What do you got?
Well, first, I mean, you are decades ahead of anybody else. So good for you that you're thinking about this. I think we had your dad come in with a voicemail last week, and it's amazing that your family's talking about this and you are just going to win at life. Just the sheer fact that this is second generation Fi and you are so far ahead of the game. So I guess what I would say, and what I say to my kids is life, it's so much easier if you can save money. So while we're going to talk about investing a little bit, like to me, it really comes down to being able to save money. So most people, really most adults, every dollar they earn, they're going to spend every cent of it. And sure, they might have nice, fancy stuff, but they don't really have any money. And that limits and takes away a lot of their choices in life. That gives them so many fewer options. So for us, it really all starts with, can you save money? Every time you get more money, can you not just spend significantly more of it or spend all of it, right? Like we talk about a savings rate, which is basically like, hey, if I earn $100 and I save 40 of it, I have a 40% savings rate. And the higher you can make that, the more choices you have, the more freedom you have, and the more quickly you can get to this point where you're free, where you're financially independent and you don't have to work anymore. So I think to me, that's where it starts. That's where I tell my kids is it's really hard to mess up your life if you have a 50% savings rate. So that's not to say like don't spend money or take everything away from yourself and just live a miserable life. Like that is not what we want to say at all. Like we want you to live a wonderful life, but we think you can do that and still have a 30, 50, maybe even higher percent savings rate. And I think that just gives you so many choices. So that's like my first and most important piece of advice. And then, to your actual question about investing, I think long-term thinking over many, many, many years is really the most important thing you can do for yourself. Investing is not about getting lucky or finding this right tip that somebody gave you to buy this one stock and get lucky. That's more like gambling. So for me, it's, all right, you're 7 years old. You have a 90-year investing life, 90 years. What can you do to give yourself the best chance of being really, really wealthy? And it's saving, but it's then investing in, for us, it's this low cost, broad based. So as many really strong companies as you can buy at one time, these index funds or ETFs. So you're buying a tiny, tiny, tiny little piece of a whole lot of companies. So if you buy the S&P 500 fund, it's 500 of the biggest companies in America. And if you buy the total stock market index fund, it's 3,000 companies. You're getting a tiny, tiny little piece. You are the owner at 7 years old. You are the owner in a small, small way of every single one of those 3,000 companies. And the 100+ million people that work for those companies, they all work for you, right? How cool is that? They work for you. And I think that there's so much fun there. There's so much power there. And every time you can save money, every week, every month, every year, you're buying a little bit more of those companies. And by the time that money keeps growing and keeps compounding, it's called, from 7 to 27 to 47 to 97, or maybe even beyond, that's going to be many, many millions of dollars. And you're going to own a much bigger piece of all those companies. It's, it's not going to be huge because they're worth trillions potentially, but it's worth a whole heck of a lot. And I think that would be my advice is just keep putting money in, keep buying these funds that don't cost you a lot. There's nobody running this fund that's going to charge you a lot of money for their expert advice. You're just finding a fund that's buying a little bit of everything. That's the advice I give my girls, and that's the advice I would give you. So, yeah, Jonathan, what do you got?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is, I'm just thinking what conversation I could have with my, he's 4 right now, but when he's 7, when he's grown up, I would probably start having conversations around, what companies, what products do you get excited about now? Is it a video game? I'm kind of thinking of Brian Feraldi here and how he kind of gamified this, and he goes into his kids' schools and he gives these lessons where so you really understand, like, these are actual companies. The products that you use, your video games, your toys, your tools, etc., your clothing, these are all made by companies. And to Brad's point, there's millions of people that go to work each day to make these products for these companies. They sell them, and a portion of that profit goes to the owner of the companies, like Brad was just saying. But if you can attach like a real company to that, I think it really helps make it real, as opposed to maybe a piece of the economy. That's good enough for me at this point. But I think one thing that I would add on to that is, like, if it takes making it real, maybe even something, a conversation with mom or dad where it's like, let's create some sort of pie that we're going to invest in. We're going to put our money in this, and we're going to put, something like 90% just into kind of everything into the economy using but let's carve out like some 10%. And I want you to tell me what companies you get excited about. And I want you to do a little research in them and tell me what you think they might be doing. And just get, are you excited about what they're, and just have some conversations with mom and dad about why you're excited about these companies. And why don't we just get a couple of those in there? That, if it makes it more real for you and you can start to realize you own a piece of this company, next time you buy something they make, that's pretty cool. You're both a customer and an owner of that company. And then, yeah, it's just following through. But what you're hoping is, let's say you have this particular clothing manufacturer and they make this particular product that you love, and now you've bought some of their stock. Well, what you want for them to be able to do is you want them to be able to sell more product. You want them to be able to increase their profits, and you want them to be able to scale over time. And when they do that, when that company becomes more successful and more of your friends are wearing that clothing, that sort of thing, they make more money and you make more money. Their company becomes more valuable, and you get that return in the form of the company being more valuable and your ownership being more valuable. So it's really cool. When you own pieces of your favorite companies, when your favorite companies do really well, then your investments grow. Conversely, if the companies don't do good, right? If the companies are not good companies and they make bad products and they get bad customer service and they end up having to let people go and downsize and all these things, then your money is less valuable. Now, the problem is we don't know. Even the people that study this really hard don't always know which ones are going to do good and which ones are going to do bad. And so we just want to own a lot of them to make sure that on average, we do well. On average, most companies grow. Most companies grow. On average, companies do better over time. And so this is why it might be nice to just own a big piece of the whole economy. And then if you're going to pick a few of your favorite companies, put them in a smaller little bundle, and you can buy a little bit of those as well. And that is investing for 7-year-olds. It looks a lot like investing for grownups.
Yes, suspiciously so, right, Jonathan? That's it's amazing. It's the same advice. So, all right, wonderful question. We got another one coming in here. Let's kick it up.
Hey guys, this is Natalie calling back again after last week's support. I'm really excited because I jumped in on M1 Finance and set up a traditional IRA account, which is really exciting. And I'm going to be transferring some of my money from my savings account into there so I can receive some extra 1% interest on that. And now I'm looking at my funds over in my Fidelity account. And I guess I've never done a portfolio rebalance, So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. At this point, I've pretty much, over the few years that I've been following you, I just put money in when I can and hold on to it so it feels safe. But at what point do I look into selling some things and rebalancing my portfolio to make it as profitable as possible? And that's why I like M1 Finance, because I'm going to let them balance for me.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, rebalancing is really scary. It's really scary. You're telling me you want me to take money out of the stuff that was doing good and put it into the stuff that wasn't doing as good? Like, that doesn't, what? It's very counterintuitive. And it's probably worth pointing out that very few people do it on a regular programmed basis. A lot of people think they're going to do it, but a lot of people go right up to that line and then say, you know what? Why don't we just keep more money in the stuff that's doing good? Tesla's been on a tear. Why don't we just let that roll for a little bit longer? I guess I can give you an actual answer here in just a second, but I just want to put a frame around that. Brad, did you want to put any additional input before we go to an answer?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo similar sentiment. It's a lot of people talk about rebalancing, but very, very, very few people actually do it and do it on any type of regular basis. Because there's that cognitive bias of like, I don't want to sell my winners. I don't want to do that. I don't want to buy the stuff that's been getting crushed. Unfortunately, that is the way our minds work. So I think what this comes back to is having a plan, having an investor policy statement, right? And the intersection of those things, and having this laid down in black and white so that you follow it and you don't let your brain get in the way. So many of us let our brains get in the way of successful investing. And I know we've talked to people like the mad scientist who admitted to this when he would wait for some wacky signs and like, certain numbers and all this other stuff. Like it gets to be like this hokey kind of, I don't even know what superstitious type thing for people. Like, I mean, lots of things about your brain get in the way of proper investing. So I think for me, it would be, how do you either have someone do it for you automatically? Like Natalie, congrats for taking action and opening up an M1 account. I know they do this automatically every time you put in additional money, or you can actually just press one button to rebalance, which is fantastic. So, I mean, that really is the easiest way. But yeah, Jonathan, like, have you ever actually rebalanced on your own?
I have, but it's more as testing the features of M1. They're one button reclick. I mean, if you think about it, the easy way to get around this is to just be in the accumulation phase and be rather early on. Like why? I think part of it is, so you've been following us and some of these are some straggler accounts you've had for what, why are you rebalancing? What would this rebalance actually represent? I'll give you a couple examples. One of them could be that you had this individual stock and then you had maybe index funds. They were running in parallel. The individual stock, let's just say it was Tesla, and it, 10x'd, something crazy, went from $40 to $400. And you're like, whoa, wow, I don't want to mess with that. Like, and then your index fund has lagged and maybe been at like 10% comparatively. It did not 400x. So you're kind of like, maybe it's time. The other one is, we're talking about a stock. I'm just kind of interested in the actual complexity. Are we talking about like a bunch of stray things? Or are we talking about a pure bond to equity type rebalancing play where maybe someone came in with a more conservative portfolio and then the other thing to consider, and we don't have this information and it's fine, is are we talking about a taxable brokerage account, or are we talking about a 401k? There are some tax consequences for rebalancing that could be incurred when you do that if you're doing it in your taxable account, which is why it's really cool with, the M1 specifically, that it's kind of doing that it's just buying, it's adding money to the underweighted parts because that avoids all taxable events while still getting the same result. It's just important to think that through. Now, conversely, if this is in your 401k, it doesn't matter. You could go all in the market, all out of the market. You could sell everything. You can move it all to stocks or bonds. Doesn't matter if there's been a profit or a loss. Like all of those taxable events are effectively, it's protected. It's happening inside the 401k. So it's not something that you need to account for. So that's just like two additional factors to think through in terms of actually rebalancing. If you have some, cats and dogs that have kind of run away, I mean, I would pretty, if you don't want them anymore, kind of what's your emotional attachment to these? Are you just trying to simplify your portfolio? I would just go in and simplify your portfolio and rebalance the heck out of it. I'm trying to think of a scenario where I might not. I don't know. I mean, I would just say, why are you rebalancing? Is it a part of your plan? Actually go and figure out what is your goals? What is your plan? And how does what you actually have match up to your actual plan? And then make sure you're doing it from a very comfortable and confident place. And then I would just pick a random day and do it. I wouldn't wait for it to hit a high or hit a low. The market will sneak up on you and do the exact opposite of what you expect. But it sounds to me like first we need to take a step back and match up our accounts. Recognize that money is fungible too. That's another thing. If you're overweighted or underweighted in your 401k, well, you could probably make up the difference in your taxable accounts with your allocation and do your rebalancing with that in mind. So do you need to rebalance? Well, maybe, but only if the way you're allocated doesn't really match up to your plan and to your goals. I hope that helps. It's not like the perfect answer, but I think it kind of gets the conversation rolling.
Yeah, I think that was good, Jonathan. I would say to Natalie that I agree with Jonathan totally. It's what is the goal? Look at that first. Then look at your entire net worth in totality. So when you're rebalancing, you're really not trying to do this account by account necessarily. Like I would look at it in totality. So what's my plan? Is it to have 80% stocks and 20% bonds, then I would look across all of my different things, my IRAs, my 401ks, my taxable brokerage accounts, and get a sense of where I am now. Then, like Jonathan said, you can make decisions in tax advantaged accounts. You're not going to want to sell funds in a regular brokerage account that have big unrealized gains and trigger some taxable event that you actually have to pay tax now if you had a different option. If you could do that under the umbrella of a 401k or an IRA and not incur a taxable event now. So I think that's kind of like the mental framework that I would approach this. And if it's something easy to do within one of those type of accounts and you really want to rebalance, if you're dramatically off, if you're just a couple of percentage points off, I have to say I probably wouldn't do it. I would let it self-adjust by my next contributions. I would, weight them accordingly. That's kind of how I would approach this. I think also, let's say if you're in a scenario where you just found out about low cost index fund investing and you've been investing in very, very expensive mutual funds, and maybe you have a lot of that. I remember the old like Fidelity Contra Fund, for instance. That was one of the options in my 401k, and in fairness, that's at least as far as I know, that's been a pretty successful fund over the life. But that's something that I invested in when that was what I asked the guy at the cubicle next door. But when I found low cost index fund investing, I realized, okay, this is going to give me, from my own strategy, a higher likelihood of success over my entire life. So, that was something that I made that change based on strategy. That wasn't rebalancing per se, but that was a change in strategy. And I think it's all kind of part and parcel of your question, Natalie, is like, you have these investments that are vestiges of potentially prior decisions you made to finding FI. So I would really, again, just kind of look at this in totality and just figure out like, hey, can I work this out just by putting in new money? Is this something that there's a pressing need? If this is like so antithetical to my current strategy, all right, then you're going to want to change that now. If there are absurd expense ratios or things like that, like, so that hopefully should give you the tools to move forward from a place of strength. So yeah, hopefully that helped. And yeah, Jonathan, I think we've got one last question we're going to take here.
All right.
Hey, Brad and Jonathan. It's James from Jonathan's podcast class. I just wanted to know your thoughts on drawing against a 401k. I have 500k in there, and using a portion of the line of credit against primary residence to buy multifamilies to speed up the process of reaching FI. There's such thing as good debt. I just wanted to see what you guys' real thoughts and mindset are on that. I think Brad had mentioned that he does own a couple of single family rentals. Yeah, so I just like to see what you guys think about that.
Well, I've never personally done it, and I could definitely see a few different ways it could go wrong. I guarantee you there are people that have done it, and so there's probably some success stories and some horror stories out there. I would probably, I don't think anybody could just come in and say, never do it. Don't do it. But I think it would be very unwise to also say, yeah, there's no problem with it. So I think there's a lot of caution tape here is what I'm trying to get across. There's a lot of caution tape here. And I would probably look for any other way to avoid it. Is there a way for me to get into multifamilies without going onto my 401k? And then I would start looking very closely at what the rules are for drawing on that line of credit. And I would start consulting an accountant. And Brad, not to get your accountant advice here, but just through the lens of what are typically the restrictions that you see, and I guess the terms would vary depending on the actual 401k plan. But when you take a line of credit against your 401k, how does it go south? Where does it fall apart?
Yeah. So Jonathan, I'm not 100% sure. James had two things in there. It sounded like he was talking about drawing out of a 401k early. And then was it a line of credit on a home, or was it a line of credit on the 401k?
Oh, maybe I conflated those as well. So I was thinking that he was saying borrow against his 401k. Now, as you're saying this, I'm pretty sure that it was, can I draw down on my 401k to invest in multifamily? And then also, because there's a gap here, take a line of credit on my house to also, it sounds like that was the balance. I'm going to need some additional money. So between drawing down maybe entirely on this 401k and a line of credit on my primary residence, I should be able to afford a multifamily maybe in full. And That's kind of what I feel like I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's misrepresenting, but I think that's what we should operate under the assumption of.
Yeah. No, that sounds about right. And yeah, I mean, James, unfortunately, there's so many complicating factors. There's no way that we could give you any type of advice, over the internet or over a podcast. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think reaching into my 401k early is something that I would only do as a matter of last resort. Or if there was just something extraordinary, like a once in a lifetime opportunity, can't miss opportunity, which I don't know if those things exist, frankly, but like if you were to come up with some hypothetical scenario of a once in a lifetime can't miss opportunity, then I would think about it. I would think, I'd consider every option, right? And I think, something that comes to mind when it comes to tapping your 401k early is there's going to be a 10% penalty. It's going to be ordinary income taxes in the current year. So, depending on what kind of income tax bracket you're in, and if you're pulling out a significant amount of money, it's going to bump you up rather dramatically in your tax brackets, plus the 10% penalty, plus state taxes. Like, you're talking about, maybe
that 25, that 500K is going to look a lot like 380.
Yeah. I mean, after all said and done, 500K is going to look like 250, right? Like,
you might be right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
because it shows up as regular income, like it's going to show up on your rate. So add 500,000 onto your current year's tax income. You're going to be, what's the highest marginal tax bracket, Brad?
Yeah, I'm not sure offhand, but you're going to be in probably a 32% income tax bracket plus state plus the 10% penalty.
Plus
yeah,
state, you're looking add 5% Virginia plus a 10% penalty on top of that. Yeah, no, I would not draw down. Okay, I can give, but there was a slight caveat, which I don't think is what he was asking, but the math on just, should I take it out of my 401k? I think it's like hard no all at once like that. Like I agree with Brad, line of last resort. Second part, and you didn't ask this, but I can't answer it with a lot of certainty, but I feel like it might be out there, is the lien against the 401k, which probably is not going to be for the full balance. So I don't think it's going to get you there. You'd want to look into the terms and conditions to see how it be applied. It sounds like this, like imagine I get my Susie Orman out there. No, it's a no. I think we should probably not. And I say that while rooting for you to be able to pull this off. I mean, I would imagine what I would really do, honestly, if you can find the deal, the money will come. If you can find the deal, the money will come. That's just a life truth. If you need proof of that, just go listen to Coach Carson, and he did an episode with us, episode 16. It's literally how he built his entire business. If the numbers are good enough, you won't be able to kick people away. So you just need to learn how to, what would the numbers need to be for me to be able to attract a investor to go in with me on this? And then how can I present that in a way that would lock it down?
What a great point, Jonathan. I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right. Like, there are going to be local investors. They're going to be investors, potentially, local real estate investors. You might have family and friends, that's usually a last resort. But again, if this is like an extraordinary thing that is an absolute slam dunk, that might be something you consider. Like, there are lots of ways to be creative. And I think if you're thinking something as significant as rating your 401k basically and potentially paying 50% of it in taxes and penalty, then you're at that point where creativity is going to come into this. So I think for me, if that were my scenario, my first option would be finding the local real estate investors and just networking and finding out, like, almost invariably, there are people that do different type of lending. You hear about hard money lending and other things, but there are just people out there with significant amounts of income that are looking to make 8% on their money, right? To loan it to you. So if this deal on a multifamily is so great, that might be attractive to you. I think if you're asking, is potentially taking equity out of your home, is that an option? Of course, that's an option. I think with ultra low mortgage interest rates right now, HELOC rates, like, that's something you can consider. Obviously, it's always look at the potential ramifications of, hey, what if interest rates spike at some point? You have to be prepared for any eventuality, right? Like, is that likely in the near to short term? No, but is it likely? Who knows what's going to happen over many years? I mean, I can't see the future. So, but I that's how I think about situations, is like, what is my downside? Can I cap my downside? And I think on variable interest rate loans, it's very, very hard to cap your downside. So there's lots of attractive looking things now. But again, if it's not locked in for X number of years, there's always a potential downside. So again, that's kind of how I would think through the issue. And
I got one more little thing to add on, Brad.
Nice.
All right. So I went ahead and just took the time to look because I've never looked into it before. The 401k loan. Plans can set their own limits for how much participants can borrow, but the IRS establishes a maximum allowable amount. If your plan permits loans, you can typically borrow $10,000 or 50% of your vested account balance, whichever is greater, but not more than $50,000. So you're looking at, there's a $50,000 line of credit. And I think that would effectively avoid the 10% penalty as well, because it's a loan. So that's your wiggle room there. Not that that's being advised, but just to kind of general framework, it looks like you have access to a $50,000 line of credit. You need to look into that further and see what your plan actually allows. And then you're saying, well, you might also be able to get a primary lien on your home. It's worth pointing out, it's probably going to be hard to get an additional financing deal if you've just taken out a lien on your home to do this. When you go to get the financing deal, they're going to take a look at loans that you've taken out recently. If they see you've taken out a 401k loan, primary loan, it's going to make it hard to get the financing. So really what we're talking about is you finding another investor that can bring cash to the table, pairing that with what savings you actually have and working out a deal to get some skin in the game. That's going to be kind of the combo approach here. But I mean, really, this is really your best bet to start getting a piece of the action. And if you can prove these numbers out, I mean, this is where I'd spend my time. This is where Bigger Pockets and shows like that just shine. I mean, case study after case study after case study of being able to identify what these numbers need to look like in order for you to be able to do it. And there is example after example of individuals that had very little money or no money, were able to get into their first deal, were able to refinance out, were then able to kind of do something similar. And I think do it in a pretty safe way. Josh Dorkin back in the day, I mean, really, he got into a hair on fire situation and got into a bad money situation with a deal that he was doing way back in the day. And that was really why he started Bigger Pockets. He needed access to someone that had bigger pockets than he did. And I think, James, what you need in this case, if you want this multifamily, you need somebody with bigger pockets. So you need to start doing your homework and figuring out, well, if I can't bring the money, what can I bring? All right, I can bird dog this. I can track it down. I can identify the numbers. I can make the presentation, show what it needs to work. And that's where you start putting your energy.
Yeah, I like it. And again, just last word here, capping downside, potentially 401k loans. If you leave your current job, you might have to repay it in full, actually in short order. So 401k loan is another dicey proposition. So yeah, Jonathan, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. So yeah, you got some options. So James, let us know what happens for sure.
All right, everybody, this was a lot of fun. Hey, can we just get a round of applause if you're in your car right now? Brad, your audio sounds amazing. It took us 3 weeks, but we figured it out. Totally worth it. Guys, I made 6 trips to his house on Friday, and not because it needed 6 trips, but because my brain wasn't working. But we were determined to make this audio this week sound great for you. So thanks for hanging in there. And if you want to tune in with us next week, or someone else that would like to join you and you want to share a link, just have them go to choosefi.com/live. It will give them all the information on how to access this event. And we look forward to seeing you there. The fire is spreading, my friends. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
If this episode was helpful to you, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends about us. We can be found on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. While you're there, don't forget to check out our other shows like Everyday Courage with Jillian Johnsrud and Rebel Entrepreneur with Alan Dalnigan. If you would like a free bite-sized course to jumpstart your financial independence, check out choosefi.com/challenge. Choosefi is produced by Andrew Mendoza and Zachary Tan and is a production of Choosefi Media Incorporated. Choosefi.com is managed by Annie Sheely with William McVeigh, MK Williams, Melissa Lagerquist, Liz Kessler, Stephen Hettig, Kelly Black, and Jennifer Ma. And Ed T is our CEO. Thanks for listening.